Okay, well, welcome everybody. Today we are going to be going over the organization and writing of your introduction speech. And ideally, this will give you the understanding of how to start to brainstorm, how to creatively express who you are, and then also be able to organize that expression of self in a way that not only makes sense for you, but also is clear for our audience. And so the introduction speech, I always love to do it the first part of our semester because it is the easiest speech to give. Why? Well, it's about you. And what do you know a lot about? Each of you know a lot about yourselves. And so it isn't a speech that demands for an exorbitant amount of research. It doesn't demand a lot of preparation. It is something that you could easily speak about. Let's be honest, if you forgot everything that you had intended to say, you could potentially keep talking about yourself for the entire 5 minutes without having anything written down. And so I like to get these introduction speeches also going right at the beginning of the semester, as it's an opportunity for each of you to get your feet wet in public speaking. Now, the difference here this semester is that you are going to be delivering these speeches on your own and then uploading them to our class to watch. Now you are going to, I am requiring you to have some kind of audience with you as you are recording, typically for speeches. But for this first speech, we're not going to worry about doing anything live with our class. You can take the time to record your speech as you need this week, and then, or when it comes time for that speech, and then you can upload it accordingly. But if you have yet to review, what I would like to say, some friendly reminders. If any of you have yet to review the getting ready or thinking about your introduction speech, that also falls in module 2. Make sure that you go back and read that before really engaging with the writing of this speech. For those of you participating today, you will be absolutely fine and I will walk you through it, but I want for each of us to go back and think about that getting ready for this speech. It's going to set you up talking a little bit about extemporaneous delivery and some things to look out for when you're preparing this speech. But for your own personal knowledge, this speech is going to be between 2 to 3 minutes in length. And if you do have that introduction speech format, either up on your computer with you or print it out, keep it out there for reference because it will help you as we go through today. I'd like to start off by looking at your introduction speech description. And this is from your Brightspace shell, but it is essentially your prompt. And a prompt in writing or in speaking or with any assignment, it is simply giving you some guidelines and directions to follow, and it will lay out the purpose of you, in fact, speaking. So let us go through this quickly together in very brief, and I won't read it verbatim, but a speech of introduction is going to be brief, but it's designed to allow an audience to get to know you on a more personal level. And so we oftentimes, when we are introducing ourselves to somebody, we will share tidbits or pieces of our background, who we are, what we are about, what we are into, what we like. And those types of topics or those interests of ours and what makes us who we are often things that then become a shared commonality with other individuals. It allows us to see, oh, what do we have in common? What differences and unique features are you going to bring to the class? Maybe by describing some of your unique characteristics or interests, you can also invite other individuals in to learn more about whatever you're interested in or who you are, what your ideologies and values are. There are a myriad of different ideas and topics that you can speak about in your introduction speech. We're going to go over those in detail, but I've listed you out a few here, including your background. You may want to share some parts about your schooling, maybe about your family, some things that you're into, if you are in any clubs or if you have any hobbies, if you are in any special interest groups, if you are advocating for something right now and working toward accomplishing a goal. Perchance you want to share with us some interesting achievements or some experiences. It is up to you on what you decide to talk about in this speech. but utilizing a couple of different elements that I just described, we are all going to be developing this introduction speech about ourselves. I am going to go over today the basic elements that are necessary to communicate these ideas. And what we will do is we will learn about developing an informative attention getter and introduction. We will develop your body, and I will show you how to develop those main points into something that is clear for all of our audience to understand. And then we will also utilize transitions to move us throughout our speech and close with a conclusion. And if you're listening to any of these words and you're thinking, well, this sounds a little bit familiar, yeah, if it does, absolutely. This structure isn't something that many of you haven't heard before. If I'm saying an introduction, a body, and a conclusion, it is very similar to that structure that we use in writing papers, and writing research, and writing essays, and writing a paragraph even. If you understand that same introduction, body, conclusion form, and if you've studied it before, awesome, you are on the right track, and that will help you get through and continue with this speech. But if you've never taken a writing class, if you're like, what's a 5-point paragraph? What is this structure? Introduction, body, and conclusion? Do not worry. That is what today is for, and that's what we will go over in this class, and we will assist you in getting that through. So again, the speech is going to be 2 to 3 minutes in length, and you are going to have between 2 to 3 main points that you are going to choose. And you're going to be required to follow these basic formats, and as well as some of the guidelines for delivery. And so getting ready to start, or going into our discussion and our explanation, or our how-to today, these are the topics that we are going to be covering. We're going to cover your introduction. We're going to talk about the elements that are necessary. We'll talk about writing a clear speaking thesis. We will discuss your transition statements, developing those main points, and we will talk about creating a memorable ending. And then if there is time, we will talk a bit about delivering the speech, but I also have a separate lecture for that, should we need to cut back on our time. Before we dive into these elements, you can go ahead and unmute yourself if you would like, but does anybody have any questions, concerns? And is everybody, if you don't have your screen on, I just want to make sure that you are able to at least look at this PowerPoint as we're going through, or is that clear for everybody? Or do you have the format up with you? I'm gonna assume yes if we don't say no. Okay, great. So any other thoughts before we move forward to this introduction?
I have a question about the amount of people that we have to do our speech for.
Sure.
So there's only 2 people in my family. I live out here, but I'm from a different place. So I only know like 2 people out here.
Absolutely, and you are more than welcome to have those 2 individuals, absolutely. You're also more than welcome to use friends from the class and ask them. I will always be an audience member for you. Over the course of the next, because we have a couple weeks before you really need to get into recording and writing and uploading this speech, I'm going to see where people are in the class for this first speech in terms of being able to have a larger audience or inviting other friends into your Zoom when you record, because that's the other option, is that you don't even have to have anybody physically present, but you could invite others via Zoom. Does that make sense?
That's great, yeah.
Okay, so as we get closer, we'll start to talk about audience members and the ability for people to or not to have them. And then maybe what we could also do is start, and this could be something we could all brainstorm together, like start a little board of people who would be willing to just be audience members for each other. And then maybe you could, meet up if you wanted. The rest of the semester, when we come to our next 3 speeches, you will be broken up into small groups. Those small groups will hopefully serve as a live audience for you to deliver your speech to. But if those groups are not, in fact, able to meet, and that's what I've asked of you in your quizzes, like those I'm sorry, it's the surveys. So in those surveys in the first module, it's asking you things like, oh, do you want to maybe deliver a speech live, or would you like to be in a speech live? When I start to put y'all into these groups, I will try to put you in with people who also would like to deliver or who would need some audience members in that way. So if you would like to deliver your speech live during a specific time with some friends, you know, we can always make that possible and just simply indicate that also in your survey. And then, like I said, long story short, I can always be your audience member, and I will grab the Chad or Dylan Rose, my daughter, and we can all sit there with you. Does that sound good? Oh, did I lose you? Okay, yes. Okay, I'm going to go back and we'll hope for that one. Amazing. All right, y'all. Every speech that you are ever going to give in this class, in the future, in your business, in your work, even if you are doing an impromptu moment and somebody asks you off the spot to speak, we should always have some kind of introduction, something that's going to introduce our ideas to the audience. And so in your introduction, we are going to have 3 different parts. And if you've ever taken an English class before, or if you've ever taken a writing class, we know that we are going to start off with an introduction. But the first part of that introduction is something called the attention getter. So the attention getter, we are going to go over in detail, but an introduction is essential to our audience as it will set up and contextualize any parts of the speech, any outside historical elements, political elements, social elements, maybe there's some background information, maybe there are people we need to know about. We need to at least get our audience interested and excited. We need to get them acclimated and understanding where this speech is going. We're providing them with some background information. And then all we are going to do is clearly communicate what the speech is about and what we are doing. And so the 3 things that each of you are going to work to create for this speech in your introduction is the attention getter, the reveal topic, and then explicitly stating your thesis. The first part, the first thing that you give is always going to be the attention getter. The last part of the introduction is always going to be the thesis statement or the speaking thesis. You will be adding other elements such as credibility and competence to your introduction when we get to the informative and persuasive speeches. But for now, these 3 elements are suffice. So moving forward, the next thing that I want you each to become aware of is this thing called our attention getter. So let's get started on this. So an attention getter, if you've ever, again, heard of a type of attention getting device, it's really this idea of getting your audience's attention. It's built right into the name of the term. It is a rhetorical strategy that is used to engage or hook your audience. Often if we come out and we say, hey everybody, today I'm going to tell you an amazing story about snails, right? This is my speech. 90% of my class is going to be like, oh, snails? I'm not interested in snails. But the theory behind it is that if we pose and start to create an idea potentially about snails through some type of attention getting device, we can get the audience so excited about snails that by the time I get around to revealing, oh yeah, this is about snails, your audience is like, yes, let me hear more. So we want to make sure that we are really developing that attention getter to get our audience excited and to get them interested in what we are speaking about. The attention getter, let me say, is the first thing that you are going to say to your audience. Oftentimes, people will start their speech and they will want to tell us the topic. The second you tell us, remember that topic, your audience has the opportunity to tune out. So we want to start with the attention getter first, the first words of the attention getter, whatever they may be, so that your audience is, again, gets consumed by the idea before they have the option to maybe not engage at all. There are numerous ways that you can engage your audience and begin with these attention-getting devices. And if any of you have ever taken, again, a class before and you've worked on some of these attention-getting devices, feel free to utilize them within this space. Now, some of those ideas are right here for each of you. You're going to want to take into consideration with your attention getter a couple of things. You don't want to simply choose any old attention getter. We want to remember our rhetorical situation, or in essence, our audience. When we speak, our entire purpose of speaking, although this is about us, remember, is for our audience to know us. The reason that we speak is for our audience. So the way that we need to start thinking is, how can I accomplish my goals and talk about what I want to, but with the audience's interest and their understanding in mind? So we want to know, there's very many different parts of the who, the what, the why, what is the purpose, what is the goal of this speech, what's the occasion. But for each of you right now, understanding that our audience is going to be key, and also our occasion. So what is this occasion? Well, y'all, we are in a classroom. We are at Santa Monica College. We are all in this public speaking class together. And the context and of this speech is quite certainly going to give us, or let's just say impact, the way that we should tailor all of our messages. When you are introducing yourself to somebody for the first time, since this is an introduction speech, we want to think about what would we want the audience to know, or how would we want them to perceive us? What do we want them to know about us in any case or situation? So the same applies for this attention-getting device. It is your first opportunity to meet your class. It is a first impression that you are making. And if the first words out of your mouth are those of the attention getter, we want them to be strong, and we want them to be delivered to your audience. So let me explain really quickly. When we say delivered to your audience, well, lots of people will come in and they will set up and they will stand in front of the audience, and then they'll say, okay, all right, so, well, all right, let's get started. Have any of you, and then they'll start to deliver. All of that, so communicates a lot of different things to an audience. And although it may be unconscious, we know that when somebody is fumbling for words, it can oftentimes communicate that they're unfamiliar with the material, or that they don't know what they are talking about. That is why what we want to do is take a huge deep breath, think of the first word we're going to say, and go forward. Because, okay, let's get going, let's start. That has no meaning to the message that you're sending. We don't want that to become a distraction. And so let us go back then and start to talk about a couple of these attention-getting devices. Attention-getting devices, you can come up with a lot on your own, I'm quite sure. And over the course of the semester, we are going to go into describing these in detail and how to build them out for your larger speeches. But for right now, starting with something like a story, a personalized story. If you are an excellent storyteller, go for it. I'm sure that many of you have been told that you're great storytellers before, utilizing different pieces of imagery, making it come to life. These senses, if you will. What does it taste like? What does it smell like? What does it look like? How can you make those illustrations come to life for us? But also, stories are super fun ways to get to know you. Maybe you could give us a little story about something you did, or a perspective of, I don't know, a story that brought you to school, or a story that was super funny and recognizes your personality. Those would be some great ways to bring in. The other thing that you can do is you can always use a joke. If you're a good joke teller, by all means, bring a joke in to our class and start your speech out with a joke. If you think about it and you watch any late night programming, things like, Trevor Noah or who am I thinking of? Like Jimmy Fallon. These individuals don't simply come out in their show and say, hey, y'all, tonight, guess what? On our show, we have Jennifer Aniston and the music of Muse. Because if you don't like Jennifer Aniston and you don't like Muse, what are you going to do? The first thing that's delivered to you? You're going to change the channel, right? And so in turn, these individuals come out and they do a big monologue. And that monologue is filled with jokes, relevant jokes about, you know, what's going on in the world. And then by the time they get done with that monologue, you're like, oh, wow, that was really funny. I think I'll stick around for a little Jennifer Aniston and Muse, right? So it really like gains you in there. But the jokes, if you are not a good joke teller and you haven't made sure that this is a tried and true joke that always lands, I would encourage us not to use it for this first speech. Now, you will not always have a live audience in front of you, so you don't know if the joke's gonna land, but when we are in person, and if you do have a live audience that you're looking at and your joke doesn't land, it can oftentimes throw individuals who have apprehension about public speaking off a bit. And so you want to make sure that you can come back from that. But the other thing, let's be honest, is that comedians have a pretty tough skin. And if it becomes uncomfortable for anyone, oftentimes when somebody tells a joke in a room and it doesn't go well, it's more for the audience becomes uncomfortable and starts to think about it. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that, one, if we're using a joke, that it's a joke that we know is going to work. Two, think about your modality. Is there a live audience in front of me to gauge off of and to understand? But then also, three, what is the joke? And if we go back to our rules and guidelines of ethical responsibility in the class, and once you go through that module, you will certainly start to understand a bit more. But ideally, jokes can oftentimes, just a joke, can lead to problematic stereotypes and ideologies that we do not want to perpetuate. Since this speech is about you, if this is a joking story or a joking situation or something that is maybe about you that you're okay to make the joke about, that's where you would want to go. But you don't want to make a joke that comes along with you and maybe making a choice to come to Santa Monica College, because now that is putting on a joke to another individual. We'll talk more about joking in the terms of ethics as it comes about, but know that it is a viable attention getter that can be very effective and can really engage people. The next one is a statistic here. So there are a lot of great statistics out there. And oftentimes when we will suggest these statistics or start to share numerical data with an audience about a topic, it can grab their attention and it can bring to light or help them to realize the severity, the impactfulness, the amount of individuals. I will use this one often, within the attention getting, but I will talk about this more when we get to attention getting in the grand scheme of the speech. But if we were thinking about things like, take a moment and think of the 3 women most important to you. Who comes to mind? Is it your mother, your grandmother, a best friend, a sister? Now, it's not a pleasant thought, but guess which one will be sexually assaulted sometime in their life? 2 out of 3 American women, by the time they are 18 years old, will have been sexually assaulted. Right? And so we say these different types of statistics that was like, oh my gosh, 2 out of 3. And then if we could actually start to see that, we could make that come to life into our audience. I'll talk to you about that too. How many individuals identify as women in the class, and then how many of that 2 out of 3 actually relates to our audience. We could break it down and say something like that means 12 of us in this class will be assaulted sometime in our life, right? So these large statistics can oftentimes engage your audience, make it more relevant, bring to light the severity or the importance of discussing something. Maybe you were an athlete or a star individual in some way and you have some statistics to support you. Maybe you are actively involved in a movement or an organization whereby the statistics of the situation is what drew you in when you realized how imperative it was. So there's different ways that you can go with utilizing numerical data as a retention getter. That plays along with the idea of like a shocking fact. And it doesn't have to be something necessarily bad, but if you wanted to, we could come out with a statement that maybe your audience didn't know about. If any of you are out there and you're amazed by science, or you're amazed by natural phenomena in the world, and something in that way relates to you, you could always bring back that shocking statement or that shocking fact to get us going. And then the last thing that I want to bring up here is something called a question. Now, we are in a situation where you are going to have potentially a live audience that you are speaking to. And when you are in front of a classroom or a small group or with a business, you are more than welcome to question the audience. These two different types of questions are both direct and rhetorical. So the direct question is the one whereby if I wanted my audience to participate, I would ask them that direct question. So if we were in a live audience and I said something like, how many of you have brothers and sisters? And I said it like that, and then nobody was raising their hand, I'd be like, oh, what's going on? The thing about a direct question, if we think about it, is that audiences for quite some time, just like all of you, if you know that when somebody is up in front of an audience speaking, we should be quiet and let them speak. We also know that in a classroom setting, oftentimes there is a speaker and then there are listeners, right? But when we go to public speaking events, that same thing happens. Individuals in the audience are those ones to listen, and then the speaker is giving their presentation. However, by asking a direct question, you do run the small risk of a live audience beginning to participate. And if you want them to participate, then you should direct them how to participate. So if I said something like, how many of you all, by a show of hands, have been to Disneyland, something like that, now I can look around the room, I can see who has and has not been. But I've also indicated to them how to participate. I've done so both using some kind of physicality, right, so they can see it, and I've also said it at the same time. Your audience and school and situations in a classroom, we are more likely to be engaged, to be giving you eye contact, to be listening to what you're saying. But out there in the business perspective, and let's be honest, in all these Zoom conversations, people have like 16 other things going on that they're doing and that they're writing. So when they are listening, oftentimes they will miss particular cues from the speaker. So it's always great to not only remind them, but also for the purpose of social norms. Going back to the fact that we are used to sitting passively by as observers, it is great for us to have the opportunity then to make sure that we indicate what to do if you do want them to participate. Oftentimes the students will just sit around like, oh wait, me, should yes, I've been, right? And then they'll start to participate in that way. I'm saying that we oftentimes run the risk of it going awry because there could be that person in the background that although you're indicating what they should be doing and that it's more so of a silent participation, that person's gonna be like, I love Disneyland and oh my goodness, thank you for asking this, Amanda. I mean, I go all the time and I love this and I love this ride. And then 5 minutes later, you're like, well, where was my speech? Because this was a really great time talking to you. So we want to make sure that we're guiding the audience in how we want them to participate. The other way that we can talk about this is through something called a rhetorical question. And many of you may be aware of that rhetorical question. It is a linguistic device, and it's a rhetorical device that is designed to get your audience thinking. Now, in your thinking about your introduction speech, in that little description, it talks a bit about rhetoric and the rhetorical situation. And let me give you just a side note quickly, because we will describe and discuss this a lot this semester. What is rhetoric? We oftentimes hear this term rhetoric thrown around in the media, in politics, in I guess our classrooms, but the faulty rhetoric. Oh, that's just baseless rhetoric. Oh, the rhetoric of all of it. You're like, so what is rhetoric? Anybody want to throw it out? An idea? Lower. Oh, yeah, Achilles. I see you taking it off.
Oh no, you saw my hand. I was kind of like, I don't know.
Oh, no, and
It,
that is okay to not know as well.
okay. It's kind of like the matter, the subject, the how should I put this in words now? Great.
That's, and I love it. And do not feel frustrated because you're like, hold on, I know it. We're swimming in it all day long. And that is why it's so hard to put a finger on, right? We're like these fish surrounded by rhetoric. Rhetoric, by definition, is the art of persuasion. And so you can write that down with this idea of the art of persuasion. In speaking, we don't think of, or like in public discourse, we don't, actually, let me put it this way. Communication is an art. It is not a science. I wish it was a science. And I'm sure that if any of you have been in an interpersonal relationship in your life, you wished it was a science as well. That if I say A and then I say B, somebody will understand what I'm saying and it will all work out well. Well, unfortunately, there are way too many factors and elements. And you'll learn about that, and maybe you already have when we talk a little bit about the model of communication. But what we say about this idea of art, and you know what, y'all? I'm going to make this a little introduction. I'm just making a note to myself, lecture for next week's introduction, like module. Okay. So when we look at rhetoric as an art rather than a science, if we think about artists, which many of you in this class are, there's many different modes by which you use your art to communicate, whether that be through drawing, or perhaps it's through singing, or through dance, or it's through, spray paint, or paint altogether, chalk, charcoal, who knows, digital design. We create our pieces of art utilizing many tools. In this class, you are going to be filling up your tool belt with different types of rhetorical devices that are going to assist you in communicating your messages. Now it says persuasion, and you're like, well, Amanda, this is just simply an informative speech about me, and we're giving an informative speech later in the semester, so why is rhetoric only about persuasion? Well, in essence, if we think about it, not just any words are rhetoric, like, hey, how you doing today? That's not necessarily rhetorical. But in fact, to allow people to get to know you better and to communicate who you are going to start to utilize these rhetorical devices, whereby it's not saying, today I'm going to urge you all to believe that I am Amanda and who I am. No. But you will naturally get that through my description. And by the end of the speech, you coming to an understanding of who I am and what I am about is all part of that artistic creation that we will do. And so this art of persuasion is something that we will work on all semester long. It is something that every single speaker uses. These devices are present with all of our speakers. You can also use these devices within your writing. And so we will talk a lot about how to color your words, how to color your speech, how to color your delivery in this artistic form. But a rhetorical question now may make a little bit more sense. So many of us know that a rhetorical question isn't necessarily one that demands an answer. So if rhetoric is the art of persuasion and a rhetorical question is one that doesn't demand an answer, let's put those things together. Have you ever been in a classroom situation, maybe, and somebody walks in late and the teacher says, do you know what time this class starts? Okay, yes, we've seen that before. Does that teacher want anybody to answer that person to answer that question? Absolutely not. They'll be like, 9:30. No. We know that we don't want you to answer that question. Instead, it is asked for that individual to know, oh, I shouldn't be late. And in turn, what does the rest of the class also know from that one question?
Don't be late.
They won't be late either. And we have just through that question, persuaded individuals' behavior, utilizing tone, utilizing that idea. So it's the inherent ideologies come very clearly communicated through that simple question. We understood every single rule we were supposed to do, social norms, etc. So rhetorical questions, that brings it back, work well in as much as your audience is on the same page. Same things with like jokes or these stories. When our audience isn't aware of that kind of questioning, because that is something that is probably cultural. I don't know. I haven't necessarily been in a school outside. I don't know if they're using that kind of sarcasm to get people to come in. But we've known and we've heard this before. Rhetorical questioning is also one of those strategies that individuals love to use in arguments, and oftentimes to put you in, or to pigeonhole you into a conversation. And we'll talk about this when it comes to persuasion. It's a great way to victim blame. Well, then why would you do that? Like, why would anybody sit and, there's definite ways to use rhetorical devices or these rhetorical questions strategically.
So one real quick question, like when we're giving our speech, like this is just supposed to grab their attention. This doesn't like, I know it's supposed to tie in with what you're talking about. Is it not? Like, I don't,
it's
what I mean?
Absolutely going to tie in to what we're talking about. Absolutely. And we'll come to understand that like in the next 2 steps, but I'm going to jump ahead. Here we go. Your attention getting device and every single thing that you should be talking about in the speech, the only reason that we are opening our mouth is for one purpose, and that is for our audience to get to know us better. If that attention getting device does not relate to you, then don't give it. If it's not a story about you and your experience and who you are, if it's not a joke about you, oh no, right? If it's not a question that's going to guide us to understanding who and what you're about, I would think about a different device. So, and you'll know this in the next frame as well. The introduction, and let me just go forward here. The introduction is only going to be about 30 to 45 seconds in length. So when we start, and I mean at most 1 minute maybe, but you are really going to want to watch your timing in terms of that. But that also helps you to see that the attention getter does not need to go on and on. Of course, attention getting devices, we could go on and on about it. And your introduction, this part of your lecture, is always the longest, because really the way that we start out and we establish those first impressions and understand how to write that thesis is our most important part. So although it may seem like, oh, we're going on and on about this, note that that attention getter is something that you want to quickly get in, and then you'll move into how it becomes you. And so that's the next part here. If you're seeing the reveal topic portion of the speech. It's okay. But it's going to lead from the attention getter into what the speech is about. Never give, as I like to say, the punchline before the joke. So we want to tell that attention getter, and then we can reveal the topic and what this is. So what we want to do is we want to make a connection for our audience. What did we do to start our speech that now our audience is going to know about? So if I did something like, and this one is done, if I had my audience, right? How many of us out there are thrill seekers by a show of hands? Oh my goodness, only 2 others, right? So we can acknowledge our audience, we'll do that. And then we can say something like, well, my name is Amanda and I am a thrill seeker in the most unique of ways, right? And then we can just come right on in and do something like that. So we can move and just make these easy questions, or I can talk to you about a story. This morning I woke up, my alarm went off at 6. It took me until about 6:30 to actually get out of bed. I then rushed quickly to start making breakfast, realizing that the time was floating by. I don't know about you all, but time these days just seems to fly by and yet also be incredibly stagnant with COVID. My name is Amanda, and my time management is recently out of control. Does that make sense? Okay, so like whatever you want to think. But again, like if there's something cool about your personality or characteristics, maybe you want to talk to us about how you are a determined person, how you are a, how you are a fun person, how you are motivated, how you are mindful. Those could be starts for you and then lead into this reveal of topic. So we want to make sure that we have resolved that attention getter, but we also want to reveal our topic. And this is something that people oftentimes forget. What's this speech? Well, who's the topic? Friends, it's you, right? It's you. And so when you meet somebody for the first time, you're not like, hey, I'm Amanda, I'm from Hawthorne. Because they would be like, oh, I'm from LA? No, we usually introduce ourselves with our name. And I cannot tell you how many individuals forget here to give their name. So for you all, for this speech, revealing the topic is simply telling us who you are and giving us your name. But there is another thing to do in a reveal topic portion, and that's something that you are going to keep in mind for the other speeches as well as this one. The purpose of the reveal topic is not only to tell us what you are speaking about, but also to provide us with any type of background information that we may need to know about in the speech when we get there, but we are not going to go into it in the body of this speech. In this speech, each of you are going to be choosing strategic main points that you will maybe want to share with the audience. And so those things about your family or your job or what you like to do on weekends. These would not be the type of pieces of contextual information you would put in your introduction. In turn, if we look here, these are things like I was saying before, if we need to talk about where this subject sits historically or politically or maybe socially, or if you're talking about just a particular aspect of an event, then we would probably want to contextualize how that event started so that when we get into the event, that just makes sense for our audience. If our audience does not have the information that they need by the time they get to the body and you start speaking, they are going to be lost. The reveal background portion of the speech, I like to compare to my television shows. If you ever watch TV, which I do, there's always this little thing on previously on, and they give you a reminder of what it is. The previously ons, they do not, let's say on season 6 of 30 Rock, which I'm on right now, season 6 of 30 Rock, they don't say previously on 30 Rock and then go back through all 6 seasons of everything that's happened in order to get you there. That would be forever, and we don't have that kind of time. Instead, if you note, they highlight only the pieces of information that you need to know in order to go into this episode. You'll sometimes see like a character pop up from years ago and you're like, oh, that means they're coming in this time, right? So it helps you at least to know what's going on, because if your audience gets to the end there, or you decide, hey, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to turn on the TV show Lost for the first time and just start watching it. Oh, here, I'm midway in an episode. I can guarantee you your audience is going to click, and you don't want your audience to turn the channel on you or tune out in any way. So getting them set up with that background information. The other thing there is for any technical jargon that you may be using. Specifically in this class, we want to use the easiest language and the easiest terms that we can. Why? Your audience doesn't have a whole booklet in front of you, and your audience is maybe not an expert on the topic that you're speaking about. Oftentimes individuals will think that they need to speak with a higher vocabulary in the public sphere. However, what we want to do is instead use more simplistic language and description in order for all of us to come to understand. When you start to speak specifically within your discipline or perchance in your job, using technical jargon will be required, of course. And depending upon your audience, you will know what you need to set up and what you don't. However, the other thing that you may want to do in the reveal topic portion, and this is for speeches in general, is also start to abbreviate or provide your audience with acronyms. And I say that because there are a lot of long names that you don't want to have to continue to repeat your entire speech. So for example, if I was going to talk about human papillomavirus, today, everybody, I'm going to be talking about human papillomavirus, but I will be referring to it as HPV. It's exponentially easier. I will not have to trip over my words all the time. And then if I tell them at the beginning, we know what it is going into it. So for each of you, you're like, all right, Amanda, well, what am I going to do? Well, this is the time where you can tell us any of those quick pieces about you that may be important for your audience to know. Things like, oh, maybe like if you want to say your age, or if you want to say where you grew up and you're not going to talk about that, or you want to tell me a little bit about how many people are in your family or what you're taking this semester, what year you are. You could do something like that. So we could go back to this idea of how many of you out there are thrill seekers? Oh, only a couple of us. I am a thrill seeker, but not necessarily in the way that you may be thinking. My name is Amanda. I am 18 years old. I am studying communication here at Santa Monica College, and I am a thrill seeker when it comes to things like food and experiences. So, something like that. Does this make sense? Okay, and I'm gonna go into a little bit more, but those are the little pieces of information if you want to know where you're from, what you're doing.
That was impressive.
Oh, like, don't think I haven't been doing this for a while. So you too, though, you know you. I bet you could do it too. So, I know you can. I know you can. All right, the last thing that you are going to do after you go in, you reveal the topic and you tell us those things. Now you're going to go into the preview statement. And this is writing the speaking thesis. I want to say that this is an important part of this lecture or this dialogue that we are having. Understanding how to write the speaking thesis is going to be something that is going to guide the entire work that you do. Today, if you don't understand the speaking thesis, or after you watch this video, if you do not understand the speaking thesis, you let me know and come find me for sure, because this is something that I want to go over with you and make sure that you have in you. Do not feel like a speaking thesis is the same as a writing thesis. A writing thesis oftentimes will answer like a research question, if you will, and it will be a statement that does not necessarily explicitly lay out what we're talking about. Again, your audience does not have your work in front of you. They do not know what you are going to be talking about or what you are going to be saying. They also don't have the opportunity to look back or ask a question, what's this about again? And so your job in a speaking thesis is to explicitly tell us what to expect in your speech. It is always going to be the last sentence before you move into the body portion. It is a combination of two things. And if you want to write this down, and always remember, it's a combination of the what and a combination of the how. What your speech is about, it's also known as your specific purpose. And then how you will talk about what this speech is about, which are your main points. And I'm going to go over how to write these and how to develop this a bit as well. When I see we have something in the chat. Oh yes, these notes will of course be on Canvas, and I will put this PowerPoint absolutely up there so you don't have to write everything if you don't need to. So let's talk about how to write this public speaking thesis. And let's go into the first part, what the speech is about. So we're going to combine these two things, and this is an easy equation for each of you to continue on with the entire rest of the semester. So what? I want us each to think, what is this speech about? Y'all, what is this speech about? Huh? Well, if we look back at this speech prompt, and if you're seeing right over here, a speech of introduction should be brief, but is designed to allow the audience to get to know you on a more personal level. Your speech prompts will always lay out, probably within that first line, exactly what the purpose or the specific purpose of your speech is. You can take that and create your own specific purpose statement. In turn, this speech is going to be about you. And so it is designed to let our audience get to know you better. The what, that specific purpose, specifically what it is. So let us look at how to do that. Keeping in mind that these speeches are delivered extemporaneously. Have you all been able to review what extemporaneous speaking means quite yet? No. And just so that I will give you an easy one, extemporaneous speaking means being fully prepared, but delivering from a brief set of notes. And so what that means is we are not going to read in this class, and we're not going to memorize because nobody has that kind of time. And we're not going to speak impromptu because we want to prepare and we want to have a guidance of what we are going to say. But extemporaneous speaking takes every single one of those and it merges it all together. We are fully prepared, we know what we want to say, and we can deliver it utilizing a brief set of notes. There may be parts of your speech that you wrote and you were like, this is beautiful. Oh, I am going to memorize it. And I'm going to deliver it word for word. Go for it if you want to. There's also going to be outside sources that you're going to need to use. Those aren't your words. So you're going to, in fact, read those potentially and deliver those words as they were intended from the other person. And then there will also be times when your audience maybe is looking at you like this. And you realize, oh my gosh, they have no clue what I'm talking about. As a speaker, we shouldn't just keep going and hope for the best. Instead, we should maybe stop and we'll have to add in something that maybe we didn't plan on at all. But extemporaneous form allows for that freedom, and it allows for you to start practicing speaking without having everything that you need in front of you. Your brains are smarter than you're giving them credit for. You oftentimes, when we experience anxiety, apprehension, when we get all of those feelings in our body that start to come about, that when we think about speaking, sometimes that can interfere with the way that our brain in fact does do things like recall or, keeping on track. We get so excited. So why we deliver extemporaneously is because it does allow you to have brief sets of notes in front of you. You don't want everything written down, and this will be described to you later on as well. You don't want everything written down, but you do want, and you are allowed to deliver from one page, front and back, brief set of notes, simply to look down, to guide you, and then to allow you to speak to us. Having keywords and phrases and practicing with only those keywords and phrases is going to be imperative to your success. And you will review a little bit of this in the delivery portion as well. But when you write this speech and any other speeches, I encourage you to write it as you intended for the speech to go. But then create a set of brief speaking notes, keywords and phrases and ideas of what you're going. And then only practice with those keywords and phrases. If you practice with your full speech, how it is written out or line for line, you're going to start to think about memorizing it. And then once you forget a word, you're going to get thrown off because it isn't in the exact order that you wrote it. You never want that to happen because you know where you're going, even if it's not said the exact way it should be, right? Just like me right there, I didn't really know where that was going. But even if you don't say it exactly how you wrote it or exactly as you intended, you can keep going knowing that you have practiced it in this extemporaneous form numerous times. So it's maybe already been different a lot of times that you've given the speech. Does that make sense to you? So every single time you practice, it may be a little bit different than it was before, but it allows the opportunity for us to practice getting that message across, even if it isn't said perfectly how we wrote it, because you're never going to be able to go into a job interview being like, hold on, my best quality is that, right, we can't do that. So we have to think about it. And it may be different. So our goal of extemporaneous delivery is to communicate to our audience like we're having an everyday conversation with them. And our everyday conversation is something that we can, of course, like engage with, but how do you talk with your friends? How do you talk with your family? What is your natural style of communication? That is where individuals start to thrive. And I spoke about this a bit at the beginning of class, that we often have an ideal of what a speaker should sound like, should look like, should be structured like. There isn't a ideal standard. Look in the mirror. You're already public speaking, and you already have all of those elements that are going to make you a dynamic speaker. I'm quite sure many of you are funny with your friends, that you can tell a great story, that you are animated and interesting in the way that you speak. Whatever your style or natural delivery is, that is how I want you to work on communicating in this class. We are, of course, going to take it to another level, whereby we're going to smooth out some of the edges and eliminate language or words that maybe fill space that we don't need. We'll also work to detract from any type of physicality that could potentially be distracting from the words rather than enhancing them. But ultimately, your voice is important to come through, because when you speak in your style, it is also easier for you to remember what you have to say. Writing and speaking are two very different things. People write in a highly structured way. People oftentimes will also, and when we write, we also don't write in first person. We write in third person. And the thing about speaking is you have a live, active audience in front of you. And so for me to say, for you to understand who Amanda Whitten, for an audience to understand a bit more about Amanda would sound odd if you were there. So we want to start to use that first person as if we were having a conversation with somebody. So for you to get to know me better could be a great way to start to say something, using those yous, those me's, those I's. Your audience is there, and creating that we and that connection is important. The other thing is that you write how you speak. When we go to write our speeches, you are going to start to want to write as if you were doing an essay. I encourage you that while you are writing, you think, how would I say this to somebody? And that's what you write down. Because the translation from writing to speaking is so different, that carryover from when you write it to when you write those speaking notes could be a little bit problematic and not make the shift as easy if you write it already in your speaking voice. So I encourage each of you to think, okay, well, how would I say it? And then write it down. When we go through and we start doing edits, or if you ever wanted me to look over your speech, and I'm so happy to look over this introduction speech, of course, just to make sure that you're on the right track or formatting or anything like that. But I will often not correct your sentence structure, because I understand that that is the way that you are intending to speak your words. And that is your, in fact, style. Will we be able to understand it? Yes, but it may be just a different style of writing. So keep that in mind as you go forward with this extemporaneous, and how that fits into how we would write our speaking thesis. So down here, what I wrote was that for all of you to get to know me better. That was the entire specific purpose. It was pretty easy. That is what this speech is about, for you to get to know me better. But if you wouldn't say something like that, you can change it, right? Maybe some of you all would never say for you to get to know me better. You would say, today you're going to understand a little bit more about who I am, right? Or today I'm going to tell you all about me by describing, right? And so we can go into however you want to say it and however you want to communicate that this speech is about us getting to know you better. And that is the specific purpose that is going to drive our entire speech. It is the reason that you open your mouth. Every single example, every single story, every single hand gesture, vocal change is going to be for the purpose of your audience getting to know you better. And so we're going to incorporate all those artistic tools we can to make that happen. So the first part, the what, for you all to get to know me better. Now what? Well, we need the how, friends. And so how will you tell us about that what? How are you going to tell us about you? That's where we come into these main points. And you may have heard about these in writing as something like your body paragraph. But these main points are really going to be the backbone of your speech. They play an important role in focusing how not only you will organize, but how the content will start to develop and create a mental landscape as well as a mental argument for your audience. It's not only going to help you sequence your ideas, but it will do so for the audience as well. We utilize these main points and this format because it is the standard by which we have already learned these stories and this information, and it's how we've been, it's how we have consumed information almost our entire life. And we will talk about the different ways that you can organize these main points strategically in order to most effectively explain your specific purpose, because main points will have different patterns of organization within them over time. These patterns of organization, which we call, will be how you will lay it out. So things like chronological organization, is that what's going to make more sense? Is it going to be like a problem solution? Is that going to make more sense to my audience? For us, we are going to be using something just called topical organization, and I'll talk about that in 1 second. But we'll start to think about these main points. And before we even get into those main points, we do have to consider our timing. Every speech that you have is going to have some kind of balance to it. And if we're thinking about this 2 to 3 minute speech, we need to make sure that we are giving an adequate amount of time to the actual body of the speech. The guideline or the rule here is that your introduction should not take more than 15 to 20% of your entire speech. And so what that means for a 2 to 3 minute speech, if you want to just put some numbers, I mean, anywhere between 30 to 45 seconds would be effective. And I'm so sorry that this is like coming up here. I was trying to switch this. Oh, look, I can do it there. Are you really? All right. There we go. Yay. All right. So we also have this body, and then we have the conclusion. The conclusion as well is even less than the introduction. Rather than an English essay, and we'll talk about this in a little bit too, where your conclusion builds out and, oh, it's developed of all these, you know, where is the world going and how can we hypothesize and what should people be doing? Absolutely not. In speaking, when we say to conclude, we're going to conclude, and it's really just a reminder of where we were and drawing it home. So if we have 30 seconds in the introduction, we have 30 seconds in the conclusion, and we know that our speech is only 2 to 3 minutes, that gives us a solid 2 minutes in the body. How many main points can I logically cover in the body of a speech? And you're like, Amanda, 2 minutes? I am 18, 21, 25, 27 years old. I have that many years. How am I supposed to synthesize myself into 2 minutes? Well, I'm not asking you to reduce yourself or your essence into a small amount of time. This is simply a get to know you with your audience, and think about 2 things or 3 things that you would want to share with them for them to get to know you a little bit better in a school audience, in a classroom environment, as individuals going through this class together. Just about you as an individual during these times of COVID or times of whatever you're doing. So I want you to note that we'll never have an unlimited amount of time to speak, but within the 2 to 3 minute time period, what specifically would you like us to know about you? And so with that 2 minutes for the body, it is suggested that you only choose between 2 to 3 main points. Knowing that any more main points, we may not be able to go in depth and develop to the extent that it truly does exemplify and clarify who you are for the audience. Keeping that in mind, I want to show you about choosing these main points. So for your main points, remember, you can choose anything that you want. We will go into the pattern of organization. Like I said, it's just this logical flow of ideas. And that's what I will talk about a lot this semester, this idea of pattern of organization. But each new main point, if you will, is going to be a topic. And that's what we're going to be doing here with topical organization. Each main point will be a topic about you. And one of those topics, y'all, well, going back to the prompt, you can look at some of these ideas if you would like. Tell us about, you know, one of your favorite hobbies or your sports or about your family or about your job, about what your goals are in the future, about what you're interested in right now. But ideally, these will help to explain you in the way that you want to your audience. You can also choose anything else really going into it. Take a second, of course, and brainstorm. Like I said, you know, what do you know? What do you love? What do you want to talk about? Think of that first. And then, you know, what 2 to 3 things would help us understand maybe who you are? What's that good first impression that you want to also make to an audience, seeing that we're in a school environment, and how can we do so? And then, you know, you could also consider your audience. What relevant or interesting things may be exciting for them to hear about, or you know, maybe you do something of interest that could assist the audience in some way. So always keeping in mind how, when we're choosing what to talk about, of course keeping ourselves in mind and keeping our goals in mind, but also keeping in mind the audience as well. So what we're going to do here is put this together. Let's write this speaking thesis. We'll take the what, that idea for you to get to know me better, your specific purpose, right? I will tell you a little bit about my family, my job, and favorite hobby. What are the main points we'll talk about? Oh, there it is, family, hey, job, what, and favorite hobby. And so they are all there. A thesis statement right down here that you can take, that you can use for you to get to know me better. I will tell you about my family, my job, and my favorite hobby. Does that make sense to everybody? Each of you can take this example, or you can also cut it, paste it, rework it to how you like to. Remember, how you state it should be personal to you and how it feels most comfortable. For me, I would say for you to get to know me better, I'll tell you about, but that is, again, the way that I would speak. It's best to consider how you, in fact, would speak. So if I was going back to doing something like, and let me just put this here, if I was going to go back and say something about this introduction, right? And I could change this one up a bit. We've all heard of thrill seekers, those individuals who are chasing adrenaline at every turn. I am Amanda, and I am a thrill seeker, but not in the way that you may think. I'm going to be describing a little bit of this thrill seeking to you later on in my speech, but for now, I am 18 years old. I am studying communication here at Santa Monica College. I live in Hawthorne, and I am excited to tell you that, and I am going to let you know a little bit more about me today by describing how I thrill seek in my job and also in my passion for food. And so now what we've seen a little bit here is that I'm going to talk to you, but I also have a theme going. It's not necessarily just to get to know me better, but I've specified it to get to know me better about how I am a thrill seeker, right? And so what I'm going to do is develop those thrill seeking. Now, you are more than welcome to do something like that, whereby your attention getter highlights that quality or characteristic, and you drive it all the way through into how you will organize your main points. And it in turn becomes that linking weave of your specific purpose. Me as a thrill seeker, you as a motivated student, you as somebody who is determined. So you can take that, or you can also say, you know, simply for you to get to know me better, I'd like to tell you about my job and my family. Any idea is fine in the way that you want to go with that type of creativity. So as we come to the end of this introduction, we saw that we have our attention getter, we reveal our topic, and then we have the thesis statement. So I'd like to open up, of course, for y'all, any questions right here, and how to structure, how to create, what we should be doing, how you should think about it.
Professor, I have a question.
Sure.
And you might have mentioned it, but it was a lot, and I was trying to pay attention. But so for the introductory speech, do we reach an end after a thesis statement? Will that be like the second or third minute?
Oh no! After the thesis statement, that's you've hit the 30 seconds. We have
Oh, that's right. That the topics.
Yeah. So this is only that first introduction. So we have the attention getter, reveal the topic, and the one that I just gave you. So it would be like what I just did for you in that small amount of time. You know, you may have an idea of a thrill seeker in your mind, somebody who chases adrenaline, I think, right? So you could, that was the whole introduction, something really simple. You can start out with like a favorite quote from a movie or a song or somebody who inspires you, right? If you wanted to, and you can say, this was the message that is on my board every day that keeps me going. My name is Amanda, and I am motivated from this message to continue to be kind. And I will show you the 2 ways that I try to impart kindness through blank and blank. Something like that if you wanted, or talk about a movie that, like, what's the moral of the movie that you really loved, or perchance is there an individual who inspires you or moves you or motivates you. So really any type of theme that you wanted to go with. And I know that the more options we get, then we start to think, oh, then I should do this, I should do this, I should do this. Y'all, this is your first speech, okay? Do not spend hours and hours doing this. I, of course, want you to write it and I want you to practice, but note that a speech where you simply say, you know, that an easy attention getter, that it's a simple thesis and you're talking about your favorite foods and places to visit. I love it. Easy enough. That's really what this purpose is. You can, of course, take on any challenge that you want to. And if you're thinking about these themed ideas, you let me know and I can always help you out on that too.